more than 1,700 videos on this channel. If you have watched even a handful of them, you know that there's something different about this video already. I'm wearing something a bit different. This video is a bit longer than some of the other ones on this channel. And this one specifically features a guest. And I don't have guests often, and there is a very specific reason for it. I am extremely protective of my audience. I only invite people or accept people who are very, very good at what they do and use techniques and tactics and methods that I trust myself, that I've used myself. And Sahirenys, the author of the High Five Banking Method, is exactly that person. And what she's talking about in her book is something I've been using since 2012 myself. So I know that her method works. I'm excited about her book and excited about the conversation that we are going to bring to you. So I'm going to let her introduce herself and we're going to take the conversation from there. Let me know what you think about the conversation in the comment section. And if you want me to bring on more of my guests and friends, I do have friends. I do have friends. So if you want me to bring them more on the channel and you like this style, then feel free to let me know in the comments section below. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Hey Kevin, it's great being here. Let me quickly introduce myself for all of your followers and community. My name is Sahirenys. I'm a financial wellness educator and the creator and author of the High Five Banking Method, a money system here to help you manage and organize your finances with purpose. I have been doing this for going on 8 years, and I'm super excited to help as many families and individuals learn how to take control of their finances so they can focus on the most important part of life, which is actually living their life.
It's amazing. Now, your story is interesting because it really started off about families, right?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
It did. So the main thing that, I realized when I was managing my finances is, a lot of times we don't realize how much our past influences our future. And my family is someone that, we were influenced by or touched by the 2008 recession. My parents were immigrants from Dominican Republic. My dad was in real estate. And during that time, that industry got touched pretty aggressively.
Yeah.
My dad wasn't making any money. We ended up losing our cars, our home, and my parents ended up divorcing. And from that point on, I looked at myself and I said, I am managing my money with fear and just always looking toward, if there's tow trucks coming around or if the sheriff's going to come to our front door. And it really affected me to the point that when I started transitioning to my 4-year institution, I got into finance and I learned about financial planning. And it felt like a ray of light. It finally was giving me all the answers I was looking for. At that point, my parents, they were very into, learning about money and, different books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and, all those type of motivational pieces to like move forward with their finances, but they didn't really know how to manage what they had. And that's what financial planning really taught me. It taught me how to pay off debt, how to budget, how to, think about estate planning and taxes and investing. These were areas that my parents had no idea about, and neither did anyone in my community. So once I got, in the industry and I was in college, I had an internship at Merrill Lynch, and I was so intrigued with everything I was learning in my classes and, in real life. And I started posting on social media about budgeting apps and different investments and stuff like that. And all of my, classmates there weren't taking finance classes, but they're like, hey, we're not learning any of this stuff. Teach us, keep sharing that with us. And it was a great experience. But once I got actually into the industry, back in that time, you weren't allowed to just talk on social media about personal finances and financial planning topics. That was, a lot of regulations,
Yeah.
HR, and it was, kind of behind closed doors. And when I wanted to help my friends and family with financial planning, I told them, hey, the first step is we need to do a budget. We need to see where you're at so that we can start planning about where you want to go. And that's really hard if we don't know how much wiggle room you have to put towards your investments, how much you can have for your emergency fund. And at that point, finances is very personal. And I learned that early on. And I decided, I'm not going to take it personal. They were kind of like ghosting me at that point. And I said, I'm going to focus on being the change that I want to see. So my husband and I, we started budgeting. We started our emergency fund. We started paying off debt and cash flowing our wedding. And the results were showing. At our wedding, all the people that we invited, they were seeing that we were moving a lot swifter, a lot smoother.
Mhm.
We weren't like scared about, the costs of the wedding or we had to get a car if an emergency happened. And I took that and I was like, wow, this stuff's really working. This financial advice is actually helping us start propelling forward. And we had the opportunity to start, our marriage with zero debt, especially when it came to student loans specifically. And,
Mhm.
we were able to cash for our wedding that wasn't holding us back. We had our emergency fund and it felt like we were propelling forward. And I realized that, it's really hard to help people, just giving them the budgeting apps that you're using or the investments that I'm in, if they don't have a foundation that holds them accountable and holds them, in place so they can build forward. Because we had that foundation, we were able to start building with confidence. And even when life threw us, curveballs during my second pregnancy, a lot of people don't know this, but my son was diagnosed with a heart defect where he would
Mhm.
need open heart surgery either after birth or a few months later. It was kind of wishy-washy. The doctor couldn't give us a specific date. But what I realized, is that during times where things feel out of control, there are a few things that are in our control. And for me, it was the how we managed our finances. So I put my finance hat back on and
Mhm.
I started organizing our finances in a way that felt clear. At that point
Mhm.
of my life, I wasn't able to like be very detailed on my budget spreadsheet or, making sure the bills were paid on time, doing everything manually. I needed to make sure my money was exactly where I needed it to be so that I could focus on what was most important, which was taking care of myself. And eventually, when he was born, my son, to make sure everything was good. And I didn't realize that was a big deal until his surgery.
Mhm.
Now, during that time, there's a lot of other parents who are going through the exact same thing that we are. And, they're talking to us, they're sharing their stories with us. And I met a mom that her daughter was going through the exact same surgery my son was, but she actually had to quit her job because they wouldn't allow her to take 2 weeks off to, for the
Wow.
surgery and the recovery. There was
Mhm.
a dad that, he had to do Uber on the side during the surgery and during those moments so he can pay for the actual surgery because they're asking you for half up front. And it's very, emotional because you're dealing with your child's life on the,
Mhm.
in a very
Yeah,
delicate
yeah.
situation, but they're
Mhm.
also having to deal with the finance portion of it, which is a headache at that point. And when I looked at me and my husband, we weren't dealing with that. We had our finances in order where I wasn't worried if we had the money for our bills. It was in our bills checking account. Wasn't
Mhm.
worried, if we needed to pay for the surgery. It was in our long-term goals account for our son's surgery. I didn't have to worry if, an emergency popped up because during that time it did. My husband's father actually passed away 2 weeks before, and my husband had to go to Alabama to, be there with his family and help out. And I told him, hey, we have our emergency fund. We got it. Go with confidence. You don't have to worry about if we're going into debt or if you're, making decisions that aren't going to benefit us. We have planned for all of these different scenarios. And when my husband realized, it's like, the way we're managing our finances is very specific. It allowed us to really be in the moment, which is something that a lot of people, especially families, aren't able to do because they're worried about the finances. They're doing GoFundMe or raffles or any of those things just to make ends meet and to also be there with their children or their family members during these difficult times. So that's why this method, I created it pretty much. And I said to my husband, how many accounts do we have? Because, sometimes you kind of forget, lose track of it, especially once you already passed the one checking account and one savings account stage of your life. And, he asked me this, and then I said, hey, we got a checking account for our bills, we have a checking account for our lifestyle, and then we have three savings accounts for our emergency fund, our short-term and long-term goals. And I was like, we both looked at our hand and we were like, hey, high five. Let's call it
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
And we called it the high five banking method. But what a lot of people don't know is because I do have a background in financial planning, there's a lot of secret financial planning tactics in there. You know, you have your budgeting when it comes to your bills and your lifestyle. You have your goal setting. You have your protection planning when it comes to your emergency fund. And this is not just like, something that sounds good or something that's just on paper. We're taking what you have on paper and putting it in real life to hold yourself accountable
Hmm.
to accomplishing the things that you said that you want to accomplish. You know, sometimes we have goals that not our neighbors don't have, but we have them and they fire us up and we want to accomplish them. That's what life's about, pushing ourselves and seeing what we could do, but also making sure that we have a strong foundation to build upon. So that's pretty much why I created the high five banking method and why I'm still sharing it till this day.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think we haven't had, other than internet conversations, right, every now and then on Instagram and whatever platform is popular at the time. I don't think we've like sat down and had a conversation before, have we? I don't think we
I don't
have.
think so. I don't think, did you go to FinCon?
I have before, but it, every 2 or 3 years.
That's a good time frame to go. Every few years you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. So I brought that up because, and I'm gonna adjust my mic here, but I brought that up for a few reasons and for the audience too, because I don't really share too many different aspects of my story. But I brought that up because we have a similar background I didn't really notice until now, in that people of our generation who grew up and saw what happened to our parents in the Great
Hmm.
Recession have an interesting take on finance, especially if you go into the finance industry. So
Mm.
my mom, so I always say this, which is a strange but true story. After the hospital, years ago in 1989, the first place I went to was a bank. That I didn't go home. I went to a bank. And that's because, so the story goes, my mom actually worked at a bank. So
Mm.
she's like, "Hey, look, here's my son," is how she tells the story. But after that, though, because of 9/11, my stepdad,
Mm.
my father was a firefighter, and my stepdad worked on the airlines. So he was,
Mm.
cleaning planes, working on the mechanics and all that type of stuff. But he got laid off during 9/11. He got laid off multiple times during the recession because people weren't traveling. And seeing
Mhm.
those layoffs over and over and over and over again, I looked around and was like, I don't trust these people. Like I don't like it. I don't like the inconsistent
Mhm.
income. I need to figure out what is my way out of here, right? So
Absolutely.
I went into finance, like how do I better plan financially? And I took an internship just like you did, figured out like, wait a minute, this is how other people do it. I need to tell the masses. In 2010, I took everything I learned from Wall Street. I interned in New York City and just plastered every dorm. Like, here's how you invest. Here's how you do all this stuff. And tried to spread the word as best I could. And that's how I am here now. And it got to a point where you get tested about like, do you actually practice
Mhm.
where you preach, what you preach?
Mhm.
And I had my jobs and was doing stuff like this because of regulations, right? And it got
Mhm.
to a point where I got laid off, and it was like, looks like you're gonna have to see how good of an investor you are, right? Did you actually
Mhm.
save? Did you actually have, manage your investments in a way where you could use it without pulling from your 401k, without pulling from
Mhm.
your Roth, right? And it's the only reason I had been able to make it for as long as I did. So it's just interesting on how we had that exact same path in a way, without actually sitting down and talking about it beforehand. But it's interesting, really interesting.
You know what's really interesting too, Kevin? When I first got into college, and I was at community college, and I was looking for a recession-proof job because my dad's wasn't clearly. He was in real
Mm,
estate, and
mm,
I got into the industry of pharmacy. That was my first major,
really?
and I've heard so many financial planners and people in the finance industry share that they started in that exact same career path. And
Huh.
then and for me, I'm like, I'm trying to like it, but I don't see myself really falling in love with this in the long run. So I
Hmm.
got out of a pharmacy and eventually got into accounting and then finance, where I learned about financial planning. And then at that point, my heart was like taken. I was like, okay, this is it. But I think
Yeah.
it's so funny, like you said, what has happened to us during '08 and all those challenging times really does impact your future. And sometimes we're looking at it as the worst thing that could have ever happened to us. But it also propelled us forward. It challenged us to move forward and to see the greater part of it because I would have never learned about financial planning if I wasn't seeking, the financial security that I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with my son's open heart surgery, that for us, that's one of the most difficult things we've went through. And he's the one who went through it, he's the
Mm-hmm.
one that has to, deal with that. But I never would have realized how important this system was until that. Because in finance, once you learn about retirement or, saving an emergency fund or budgeting, it just feels like second nature. You're like, of course we're doing that. We're not thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it anymore because it's like washing dishes. It's like second nature.
Mm-hmm.
But it's until, you hit hard times and you're like, whoa, that really was beneficial. That
Mm-hmm.
really did give me peace of mind. Because during that time, what I don't share a lot of the time is that, my husband has his own business. And if you don't work, you don't get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And for that entire time with those double emergencies, we didn't earn a penny, that month. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
get any invoices coming in. So our system made sure that we had our necessities taken care of, that we were thinking about, all of the missing pieces in our system and our family that we needed. And I feel like a lot of times we don't appreciate those systems until the hard times. It's kind of like when you have a cold. You're
Mm-hmm.
breathing every day, all normal, but then when you have a cold, you're like stuffy nose. You're like, I miss breathing. I miss from my two
Yeah.
nose.
Yeah.
And you take it for granted. And, that was the moment I was like, you know what? A lot of families are struggling with this, especially when it comes to our kids, our own health as well, or our parents' health. And we really need to make sure that we have the basics taken care of so that we can start thriving, not just always surviving and starting over. That cycle has to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And just like your family and my family, we're trying to stop it from the roots.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
stop the damage now so that our kids can also start benefiting from this and living in a stable, healthy household. And that's one of the things I love so much about the high five banking method. I designed it so that I can easily even teach my children about their finances. They
Mm-hmm.
can just look at their hand and be like, okay, I have my bills checking account, my lifestyle, my emergency, my short term and long term, and they can start feeling empowered and excited about their journey. Because a lot of times, when you turn 18, you're just like thrown out there, figure
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
out. You get into student loans and all these different things that you need, like cars and trying to move out. And it gets complicated and overwhelming. And you don't have a system. You don't know how to, manage your finances. And something that I learned is if you don't give your finances purpose, the world is going to find one for you. They're going to
Absolutely.
find reasons to, a new subscription, a new payment here. They're going to find it. Don't worry. They're going to take their money from you. So you need to make sure that you are in control of your finances because when the world, presents itself that way, you need to be able to take charge and take control of that because it's going to test you one way or another. And everyone's going through different challenges. You just never know what you're going to be experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say that as someone who, is still actively managing clients, I see so many different types of people. I think most people think like a financial advisor is just you only do investments. Like, no, I help people with their cash flow, help them with their savings, and a bunch of other things. And I often get a question like, well, I need to figure out like how to budget exactly. And
Hmm.
some people say, I tried a spreadsheet. I tried, doing things with envelopes, and I usually will recommend your system at the end of the day. I'm like, hey, look, honestly,
Yes.
this is the easiest thing, and I'm glad that the book is coming out, so I could just throw the book at them, right? Or gently slide it across the table. It's the easiest way to do it. Because I've used a version of it, and it just
Hmm.
cleared things up for me. It's just an account for this, an account for that, and just I'm done,
Move forward.
right? Yeah, and just direct
Exactly.
deposit to all of them, and I'm good to go. So explain to, I mean, you've kind of gone through it, but like explain to the viewers and listeners why this is so much different than some of the other methods that people are used to hearing about, and for me and others, why does it take away a lot of that stress that budgeting has for a lot of people?
I think for a lot of people, when they hear the word budget, I call it the B word, the B
Yeah.
word. People act like you just cuss them out and you're just like, I just said budget. It's not your enemy. It's here to
Yeah.
help clear things up. But a lot of people are just switching from one budgeting app to another, from one strategy
Yep.
to another. And the high five banking method is here to tell you, you don't need another budget. You need
Hmm.
a system for your finances.
Yeah.
And that's what we're offering here. It's not a compliment. It's a compliment to your budget. It's not against your budget. If you budget and do the high five banking method, you're going to see what your goals are and you're trying to accomplish actually happen in real life. So I always tell people, don't get rid of your budget, keep your budget, but add a money system to it. And that's what the high five banking method is doing. And when it comes to, how much money to put into it, what I've heard a lot of people, ask me is, okay, what percentage? Do I put 50% here and 30% here and 20% there? And people are really trying to force themselves into these rules that were just created a few years ago, like the 50-30-20 rule. And I'm like, you guys got to let those rules go. The high five
Mm,
banking method isn't concrete, it's fluid. It goes based on what you actually need. So you need to calculate
mm,
your bills and see how much money does your bills actually cost. Because
mm.
sometimes a lot of people don't actually know that number. What their minimum cost of living is. That's an important number to know. So if
Yeah.
hard times come up, you know exactly how much money you need to cover your essentials and how much your livelihood actually costs. And then
Hmm.
when it comes to their lifestyle, people, they get a little weird, like, oh, I feel guilty, spending a dime on my lifestyle. Or they end up putting it on their credit card and they're like, I don't really know how much I'm spending. I'm just spending. Give yourself a budget for your lifestyle and say, hey, I want to spend $500 on eating out, hobbies, buying clothes, doing stuff with my kids or my husband, and just enjoy it. Don't feel guilty about it. That's what helps people, start creating a plan for their money and not letting the world control them. Say, I'm gonna stick to this $500 because that's what I'm choosing. And if I use my credit card, I'm paying it off on full because I'm transferring the money from my bills, from my lifestyle account straight to my credit card to clear it off.
Yeah.
And when you start managing your finances with purpose and intention, you start moving differently. And that's what I want
Hmm.
more people to experience, that confidence in saying, I don't have to feel stressed because I set a plan for my money and my accounts, because it's in one account, I could clearly see it. It's holding me accountable. So if you go to your lifestyle checking account and you see that you only have $200 left, you only have $200 left. You get to
Hmm.
decide what you're going to do with that. Either you go out to dinner or you buy an outfit or, go to the movies. Make that $200 work because you already spent $300. You
Hmm.
have a choice. It's not that you're limiting yourself. You've made a choice to only spend that much. And I want people to start just realizing that they're making choices. When it comes to where you live, that is a choice. I'm not forced to live here in San Diego because against my own will. This is a choice that I'm making. And I have to accept that. Okay, I'm a big girl. I'm making this choice. So don't feel bad about the choices you're making. Just make sure that it means something to you. And when you see that you're getting value from it, you're not going to feel as guilty or as bad for that. So that's one of the main things I want people to start, exposing themselves to and getting comfortable with.
Absolutely. And I think something that I think we need to get used to, and maybe I need to do a better job at this myself. Like we are very used to segmenting our accounts like in the investing world. And partially because of the
Hmm.
rules, right? It's like, oh, you have to
Hmm.
have a 401k, you got to have an IRA, you got to have these types of accounts. And we all accept it. Like, yeah, and we just do it. And again, a part of it is because of the rules, because of and
Hmm.
their account limits. But when it comes to checking and saving, we just yeah, just put it all in one account sometimes. Or maybe just
That's
a
what we're
set.
used to.
Yeah, and
Think
it's
about the
like,
first time that you got a bank account. You went
mm-hmm,
in as a teenager, maybe, or a high
yep,
school senior or a college freshman. You got a job and one checking, one saves, and you're banging your head against the wall trying to figure out how to
mm-hmm,
manage all of your spending and all of
right,
your savings. And
right,
I remember when I went to the store when I was younger and I looked at my checking account before I checked out and I was like, I don't know how much I can actually spend. I have bills
mm-hmm,
coming out. I'm not really, comfortable or confident that I can afford this. And then I would just start whipping out my credit card
mm-hmm,
and putting the purchase on my credit card so I didn't feel confident in that. And when, you do go over budget, that creates a big issue now where
mm-hmm,
you're now getting into some level of high interest credit card debt. And I think a lot of people are managing their finances this way because they don't have a system for their cash flow. Their cash
mm-hmm,
flow is all wishy-washy, like, oh, is this or that. And we need to make sure that we are feeling confident as consumers and also as people who need to make sure that we are making sure the house has everything that it actually needs and not going into debt because that hurts a lot of people. And, what ends up happening in financial planning is that they'll start pooling their retirement funds when an
Yep.
emergency happens or
Yep.
their credit cards are too stacked. They'll
Mm-hmm.
start pulling their home equity out. They'll start going to, check cashing places or opening up more credit cards, and the cycle gets bigger. It becomes like a big monster at that point. And, as a financial advisor, I remember I told my boss about my money system. He was like, this is exactly how the top clients that we have manage their finances,
Mm-hmm.
actually. They are very, very purpose oriented and they're not, pooling their investments, going into credit card debt. They are actually seeing the benefits and now they can invest more. They can, have more purpose and intention when it comes to opening up 529 plans for their grandkids or helping them, when it comes to buying a house. That's how we move forward. That's how we
Mm-hmm.
propel by having a strong foundation, not by just wishy-washy and budgeting a little bit here and then the rest of the month, forgetting about it. By having a money system, because we have so much mental load. Even think about
Mm-hmm.
you as a father, you're working, you're doing content, you have a wife, you have a lot of responsibilities. You can't be perfect all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's impossible. Your spouse can't be perfect all the time. And even if you're like a single parent, you can't be perfect. You need to give yourself some margin, room for error. And this system really helps you do that because you don't have to be perfect all the time. Sometimes you can just go into your account and be like, okay, I have my emergency fund. I feel confident. Okay, I have this much money left over for groceries. All right, I can work with that. But we don't do that. Everything has to be perfect. And we're setting ourselves up for disaster at that point, for failure. We're going to be disappointed in ourselves. Too many people are, feeling depressed and feeling down about their situation because they're not clear on what's actually happening. And for a lot of people that I speak to, they're actually doing better than they think. They just don't know it. They're like, I feel like I'm
Mm-hmm.
behind. You hear this all the time. I feel like I'm behind in retirement. I
Yep.
feel like I'm
Yep.
behind where I
Every
should
time.
be, compared to my friends and my neighbors. And it might not be that. It might just be that you don't know what's in your junk drawer.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
need to organize that junk drawer and get some, actual bins in there that have purpose and intention so that you can start seeing what you have and utilizing it more strategically. That's what happens too. Now that you have your savings and you see that you have money set aside for your short-term goals, whether that's a vacation or annual memberships that come up, now you're like, okay, I know that I have that money set aside. If I use my credit card, I feel confident that I can pay it off in full and I'm not going to get in credit card debt because the Costco membership came in. And
Mm-hmm.
there's always the little things that take us overboard. It's not
Yeah.
always the big things. Sometimes it's the little things and that compiles and that, adds up to the stress. So we need to start relieving that mental load and starting creating systems. It might just not be just your finances. It might just be also in your household as well. Something that I've implemented in my home is all hands meeting that I talk about in the book to help you maintain your money system.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people only have budgeting dates where they talk about the past expenses. I think that's 100% important because you can see what worked and what didn't work. But what I also add to this meeting with my spouse is what are we projecting for the next 30 days?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to have date night? Do we need to hire a babysitter? Do we
Mm-hmm.
have a birthday or a wedding that we're going to? How much is that actually going to cost us? And are we implementing that into our finances? If you're going to have date night, you might not need to have your grocery budget so high because you're going to be going out to eat for these different events. Everything kind of
These
trickles
are
with
these are
each other a
true.
little bit.
Well, that's 100. Sorry to interrupt. That is 100% true. There are times where we're like, hey, we actually don't need to order that much because kids are going to grandma's. We go on date night. Let's just do 5 days instead of the whole week. Like that is 100% accurate.
Yes, you experience it. And eventually you're going to be like,
Yes.
oh man, the dog
Yes.
vet. There's so much that's
Yes.
included in our life. That's why personal finance is so complicated because
Hmm.
it's attached to our real life, what we're actually
Yeah.
experiencing. And that's why, you don't want to just do a budget date. I used to do those as well, but you need to start planning forward and
Hmm.
start getting prepared for the things that are going to be coming. This is you being more proactive instead of reactive. And, that also helps with the cleaning load, as a busy
Hmm.
family. When you have your own business, There's a lot of cleaning that has to be done. There's a lot of activities that your kids need and that you're doing. You might be, like you said, we're going to FinCon or we're going to this business event. How are we going to maneuver and manage everything so that it's not too heavy for the person that's staying home or for the family? So I always want people to stop just thinking about the past and start also including the future when it comes to managing their finances and their money systems, because that's something that, a lot of people don't consider. In my book, I talk a lot about all of these home organization shows. I'm
Mhm.
obsessed with those. I love them. Take these messy homes and they organize them all
Yeah.
beautiful. And what I realized in those shows, when I started watching the later episodes, is that a lot of returning clients will come back and say, when you left, everything was beautiful, but then a couple weeks later, the house is a mess again. And we don't consider the actual amount of maintenance that's required. When it
Mm.
comes to our finances, think about it, as financial advisor, you have semi-annual and annual
Hmm.
meetings, because we
Yep.
need to keep up and see what's going on and pivot if we need to. But we're not doing that. We're just saying, oh, we cleaned the house, we cleaned our finances, and then we'll just wait till it gets horrible, and then we want to start, reorganizing and cleaning it up. And it makes us feel like we're winning, then losing, winning, then losing, winning, then
Hmm.
losing. And we need to let that go. We need to start making some adjustments in our patterns so that we can continue that momentum of winning, winning, winning. But we're not going to do that because, you know, it's work. It's
Yeah.
presented as work. Maintenance is work. But
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
it actually takes to have a successful, household, successful finances. It's going to take a level of work, but it might not be like every single day doing your budget. It might just be like, hey, every 2 weeks, we're going to sit down, review the budget, and then at the end of the month, we're going to see what worked, what didn't work, and take that information and go forward with it, not just let it disappear like amnesia,
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
happens too.
It does. It does. And two things before we end. So one, maybe three. So one thing is that's I appreciate systems and ideas. I just appreciate systems and ideas in general, but I appreciate systems and ideas that are rooted in real life. Like things that
Mhm.
like, hey, I have been through some stuff and here's what helped me get out of it, and I know this is going to work for people like us. For example,
Mhm.
like I believe in your system because I had to come up with something similar for myself because when before going into finance, and I think most of my followers know this, but I started as a teacher in Dallas, Texas. And when I say
Mhm.
that, if you know, you know, Dallas ISD at the time, which independent school district, I know in California it's they say it differently. I forget what they're like unified school districts in California.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's I don't know, Texas, California weird. Anyway, um I say that because in Dallas at the time you got paid once a month. That was it. So imagine fresh out of
Mhm.
college, you get your paycheck on the 5th or whatever day it was, and you sit there for the rest of the month. You pay. I mean, imagine getting paid first, pay the first of the month or whatever, paying rent, and then that's just it. You got to make that thing stretch the entire month. And if you
Mhm.
overspend or something, that's it. That's just completely it. And I was just deathly afraid of like, hey, what if I spent next month's rent or whatever because it was, I got paid on the 5th or whatever. It's just like a lot of stuff that just didn't line
Mhm.
up. I was just like, oh my God, I need to figure out how do I budget this stuff the right way. So that's when I started splitting and just making different accounts on this kind of stuff. And my time at this time, we were just dating at the time, my wife now, she was at NYU. So I was flying her out from New York to Dallas. So I'm like, I had to have an account for that. And she was in grad school, so she had no money. So I'm like, all right, here's a travel account. Here's the bills, and here's just stuff for me. Like I had to figure that out, and that's how I know it works, right? Because it saved me from going broke. And my first job getting paid once a month on a teacher's salary. You hear me? Like,
Hmm. I
so
understand. No, it's
yeah,
it's hard because even like you said, if you own your own business,
yeah.
like you have as well,
Hmm.
sometimes you get a client that's a net 30, net 60.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Woo,
about that.
been
And
there.
some, exactly. And something that I've been sharing in the book that is a little bit of a strategy is the 2 week gap strategy.
Mm,
And that is having your bills being ahead of your bills by simply 2 weeks. Now,
hmm
I'm not saying like a month or 3 months. I know that's a little aggressive, but if you make the transition to being ahead of your bills by a minimum of 2 weeks, you are going to fix your cash flow. And when I was in community college, I was working full time at a payday loan spot. I had no
mm,
idea about finance or anything like that. And I realized that these people had money. That wasn't the issue. But they
mm,
were living paycheck to paycheck because their bills were off sync with their actual payday loan.
mm.
So they would need the payday loan to be like a specific amount of money, and the interest was astronomical. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't even know that they got into the hundreds,
hmm
deep hundreds. I was like, oh my goodness. And in 2 weeks, they'll be back to pay off their loan, and they would get another one right away. And I was like, what is going on? A lot of people, even if you're not using payday loans, you might be using credit cards, they are living behind their bills. So we need to, create a strategy to get in front of it. And, the strategy is a little dramatic for some if you haven't done a no spend challenge before, but it's pretty much like you're doing a no spend challenge where you're pausing all lifestyle expenses, all saving, all extra debt payments, and even investing at certain points so that you can finally get 2 weeks ahead. And that mental load of releasing that stress is huge for so many people because the amount of people who are actually getting into credit card debt and utilizing payday loans, it has not gone away. We need to make sure that we have a solid foundation so that we can start investing and start, buying homes and being there for our families when times really matter. But when we're dealing with, our emotional hearts and the life that we have and the finances, we're going to be stressed and we're going
mm
to feel overwhelmed. So instead of, like you said, you're living with one paycheck for the whole month, how can you maximize that paycheck to relieve your stress? A lot of the
hmm
systems that I create are to relieve stress.
Yeah.
I can't handle too much stress either. I'm a person. I'm not a robot. So, start implementing little things, little shifts, how you manage your finances for a lifelong, peace of mind. So you don't have to worry about it. Because once you get ahead 2 weeks, you're kind of on that rotation where you're going to stay ahead. You're kind of not like spending all the money. You're staying ahead every single time. So now you can start seeing your future a lot clearer. And I feel like a lot of people, they are getting paid once a month. People who are freelancing, have their own businesses, they're getting paid 30 days out, 60 days out, and they have to figure out how to manage that. And, for the months that they get paid a little less, how do you handle that? Not everyone has, a fully funded emergency fund, and that makes things a little more complicated. But when you're at least a little bit ahead, you'd be like, okay, I can at least have the light bill. I at least have the cell phone bill. All right. I'm moving forward. I feel better about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I truly appreciate it. Um, Tell us more about when the book comes out, how people can follow you, contact you, and where can they order as many copies as possible.
So the book is going to be out March 3rd. It's going to be available everywhere that you buy books, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Target, Walmart, every single store that sells books. If you want to follow me, I'm on my social media is Poised Finance Lifestyle. My website is thepoisedlifestyle.com. And I also do Q&A. So if you have questions about the hi-fi banking method, how to apply it, how much to save for your emergency fund or how much to put towards your bills, I definitely go over a lot of those different topics. Just send me a DM. Don't be scared. And I'm there for you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for having me.